Welcome back to part 2 of our mini lecture on the Battle of the Somme. So we were talking at the end of the last lecture about the recruitment of a new army, Kitchener's army, and this is where we're up to in our notes now. So understanding that we had over 1.2 million men in the British Army by April 1916 as they begin their preparations for the Somme offensive. But as I said before, we've got to understand that mostly they're inexperienced and inadequately trained men. Even most of those that have had frontline experience is just to hold a trench in a fairly quiet sector. And one of the things that we need to focus on is we have to think about not only the infantry and their training, but also the artillery. Really, really important to think about the training of the artillery, that is the gunsmen. How accurate are they? How quick are they? Because this can make a huge difference in these kinds of battles. The other thing to understand is the tactics that are being taught. So the infantry in their offensive are taught to attack by basically going over the top and walking forward across no man's land in straight lines, keeping their colleagues on either side of them. The small group infiltration type tactics that we see being used by the Germans are not a part of British infantry training. So we're building up for the Battle of the Somme, and unfortunately the preparations for the Battle of the Somme are not a very well kept secret. So there is massive movement into a sector that had previously been quiet, and there aren't many initiatives taken in order to keep the build-up particularly a secret from the Germans. We see the movement in of massive artillery, both field artillery, which is smaller and more manoeuvrable, but also this heavy artillery. And here we've got an artillery marksman, starting to get ready to see where the artillery might go to. The other thing that we see is the Germans taking time as they see the build-up coming. They actually take time to build deeper dugouts, and this particular one is what we call a concrete pillbox, and it's been built up as a concrete reinforcement for machine gunners. This one is just from the north of the Somme region, but this photograph's taken in July 1916 and shows you the kinds of fortifications which the Germans have had a chance to build because they understand that there is going to be a major offensive against them in this area. Deeper dugouts, all ready to go. Of course, it's still a secret when it's going to happen, but the Germans are ready. It's also noteworthy that the British press wasn't keeping it a secret either, and the British press was talking about the big push that was about to come in France or Belgium. So definitely not kept well a secret. So let's look now at the actual landscape and the opening of the offensive. So from 24th of June, the British begin their artillery bombardment. This is a fairly typical shot of a Somme battlefield. As you can see, quite flat, and it varies between a few hundred meters to no more than a couple of kilometers between the British and the German lines in the frontline trenches at the Somme. So 24th of June, we commenced the artillery bombardment, and the British had prepared for this. They had really made sure that they had a large number of artillery guns on the front line ready to go. Much more intensive bombardment than anything the British had undertaken in 1915. The intention is to cut the wire in no man's land, and this was going to be done mainly with the smaller field guns. And they actually planned about 2 days with the smaller field guns with the intention of cutting the wire in no man's land. And then that would be followed by 3 days of heavy artillery bombardment, some of those bigger, chunkier guns. And those heavy artillery would basically help to destroy the frontline trenches and really inflict heavy casualties on the Germans. This bombardment continued through till the 1st of July. It had been planned to the 29th of July, but weather was so poor, raining, foggy, when they got to the 28th, 29th of June, that they actually kept the bombardment going for an extra couple of days until there was better weather for the infantry attack to begin. One point to make about the artillery bombardment: the British did not yet have the ability to properly target the opposition's artillery guns. So while they are bombing no man's land and they are bombing the German trenches, they are not able to target and therefore destroy any of the German artillery guns. What this means is that once our infantry attack did start, the German artillery was able to return fire and cause havoc for the infantry attack. To give you a sense of how many shells are actually fired, this picture is taken after the first day of artillery bombardment. These are empty shell casings from shells that have been fired. And yeah, there's a lot of metal there. The other thing that takes place just before the infantry attack is the explosion of underground mines. So we have had tunnelers working in the Somme region, and about 10 minutes before the infantry attack, there was a series of explosions underneath German trenches. Now, while these explosions were quite successful in terms of inflicting damage to the German lines, there weren't a huge number of them, but just something to add in to understand the planning that had gone in to this particular offensive. One of the massive problems, however, with the British artillery attack is the quality of the shells that they were attacking with. And unfortunately, there were many what we call dud shells, shells that did not explode as they should have. This here is a picture, a modern day picture of unexploded shells which are still being found in the battlefields of the Somme. And farmers basically collect them and stack them up on the side for the French army munitions units to come and take them away and ensure that they're properly disposed of. But unfortunately, you might recall the shell scandal where the British were short of shells in 1915. Well, they increased production numbers, but unfortunately the quality of the shells being produced was not as good as they would have liked it to have been. And so while we do see massive artillery bombardment at the beginning of the Battle of the Somme, in some sectors at least, it's not as effective as it should have been, because the shells that were being fired were not actually exploding. The other problem we've got is that in some sectors, the wire, which was supposed to have been cut by the shells, was not cut at all. In some sectors, the wire was cut quite well, but in some sectors, it looked like it had been completely undisturbed. And in fact, what had happened is that the shells were of a type that while they hit the ground and exploded, instead of cutting the wire, it effectively just blew the wire up into the air, and then it would land back down without having been cut at all. So this was a problem in some of the areas across the Somme. This picture here is a German trench. And yeah, you can see the destruction that has been caused by the heavy artillery bombardment, but these soldiers are still smiling. So they have had a chance to hide in their very deep dugouts, and while there were injuries and there were deaths as a result of the bombardment, the impact on the German numbers was nowhere near as high as the British strategy had accounted for. What this means is that as the infantry attack started on the 1st of July in 1916, the Germans did have time to come out of their dugouts, re-put their machine guns back in place, and be prepared for the British infantry attack that was about to come. And unfortunately, within 2 minutes of the beginning of the infantry assault, many of the British infantry were being gunned down by the German machine guns. The German artillery was also able to begin bombardment into no man's land and make it very, very difficult for the British infantry attack. The British infantry had been promised that they would be walking across, the Germans would be disorganised, the wire would be cut, and they could just walk into the Germans' frontline trenches. But of course, that's not how it proceeded. Another weapon that I haven't got on the notes is a flamethrower, which was actually built into no man's land by the British. Apparently there were 4 of these massive gas jets that were built into no man's land. 2 of them had been destroyed by artillery bombardment prior to the infantry attack, but 2 of them were operated on the day, releasing huge streams of gas into the German front lines. Very effective, but short-term use. And we might watch a video that shows us just what this weapon was, because a lot of archaeology has been done just in the past 5 years to understand this weapon and how it was actually used. We've got to understand that our infantry attack, our British soldiers, Tommy soldiers, as they get up and go over the top, they're wearing full kit. That's up to sometimes 50 kilos that they're carrying. You can see here they've got not only their rifles and their bayonets, but massive equipment that they're carrying with them. And some of them are carrying, very large amounts of equipment. Of course, they're planning for a breakthrough. They're planning to be moving up to the German second line, if not the third line, in a day, and creating reinforcements for themselves in these new areas. So they had to carry quite a lot of equipment with them. You can start to see the quality of the ground that they're walking over, very muddy, and as you get further into no man's land, also massive shell holes, which are very difficult for them to walk across. And that's before you start talking about machine gun fire and artillery bombardment from the Germans, making it so dangerous. One of the things at the Somme is what we might refer to as poor communication. And so while these initial waves of men are going over the top, we have orders coming from the command from the very beginning, inflexible orders that a certain number of waves are to go over the top, regardless of what is about to happen in no man's land. And so poor communications and just sticking to that initial plan leads to massive casualties for the British on the front day, on the first day. We did see gaining the front line and pushing slightly beyond on the first day, but there are not sufficient reinforcements coming through in order to really capitalise on these gains on the first day. On the first day alone, the 1st of July 1916, the British suffered 57,000 casualties. 19,000 of them were killed, and there are another 2,100 men missing after the first day. 60% of those casualties were as a result of machine gun fire. Now, that's quite unusual because normally we're seeing more than 60% from artillery fire. But on that first day on the Somme, it's the machine guns that are doing the majority of the damage. In contrast, the French in their sector had made good gains on the first day. Much better trained artillery, much more targeted, and the infantry had made significant gains on the first day alone, with far fewer casualties. In fact, they'd taken 3,000 German prisoners on the first day, while suffering only 7,000 casualties themselves, in contrast to 57,000 British casualties. Something to reflect on in terms of the training and experience of the troops as they entered into the offensive. This finishes part 2. We'll come back and see how the battle progresses beyond the first day in the next mini lecture.